I do want to talk about your most recent column in which you hypothesized or you kind of raised a question that was very newsworthy and very interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that question is?
Yeah, it's a little gossipy, I suppose, but it's basically raising the possibility, the notion that Governor Cuomo might be leaving in January, that he might go work, assuming that Joe Biden wins the presidency, that he might go work for Joe Biden. I do think it's a real possibility. The governor has said he won't do it, but politicians say these things, and then a few months later they do the opposite. So, I do think it's a real possibility.
Cuomo and Biden have been really pretty close as far as political allies go, right? In the last
They
couple
are
of
very
years.
close. Yeah, that's right. They are close. Cuomo endorsed the vice president very early on in this whole thing, and he stuck with them. There were a lot of moments where Biden looked pretty weak. After the Iowa caucuses or the Hampshire primary, it looked like he was not going to get the nomination. And Cuomo, never wavered, never suggested that maybe Biden shouldn't be running or that he wasn't going to support Biden or anything like that. He was with him the whole way. And I think they're, based on things I've read and other things that you hear, they do have a kind of a close personal relationship. And they come from, pretty much the same part of the Democratic Party.
Sure,
Not
they're
super
both kind of
progressive.
moderate
Yeah,
centrist.
yeah. They're both people that like real progressives are skeptical of. They're a little bit old school, kind of behind the scenes operators, people who get into like the nitty gritty of politics more than maybe ideas and ideology.
Now, Cuomo has said, as you said earlier in this interview, he said, hell no, I've been there, done that. I was in the Clinton administration. But what do you think it would take? Like, just from your perspective, what do you think it would take to get him to go back to Washington?
I think it would take the right job. I mean, what I was relaying to people is the kind of stuff that you hear around town, right? And people seem to think that there are certain jobs he might go for. Some people think Attorney General would make sense, that he might be excited about that. He was the Attorney General of New York. He's a lawyer, obviously. It's pretty high profile, especially now with all the criminal justice issues that are happening. And Cuomo has spoken up a little bit more on those issues lately than, of course, they're front and center, so that's part of the reason why. But he has said things like there is no justice for Breonna Taylor and things like that kind of have some people wondering if maybe he is kind of looking a little bit nationally at the issue.
Maybe testing the waters a little bit to see what responses come back from his statements like that.
Yeah, and also maybe just to build a little support if he does become the nominee, right? Because, first of all, you have to be confirmed by the Senate, and he would supposedly or presumably want the support of the entire party, right? So, Chief of Staff is another one that people have raised. That one is a little bit dicier to me because on the one hand, you could say that, as I said in the column, that Biden is a little bit frail, he's a little bit older, and he might need some muscle kind of in the White House, and Cuomo would be good muscle.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's kind of like the Rahm Emanuel style of a chief of staff. If you remember him from the Obama administration and from his
former mayor of Chicago as well.
Yeah, and a not very good mayor of Chicago. But other people told me that, chief of staff would be weird for Cuomo. He's kind of a guy who likes to be in charge of something. He's not like a team player. He's not going to like keep, feathers unruffled and kind of do the things that a chief of staff has to do to keep the place running smoothly. The other one I raised in the column was Homeland Security, which actually makes a lot of sense to me because Biden could say, I'm putting him, in charge of the pandemic response. It's a Homeland Security issue. Obviously, Cuomo's been very prominent nationally on that issue, seems to think of himself as this kind of authority on the issue, has a book coming out on the issue. And that would also allow Cuomo to kind of say, I know I'm kind of leaving New York in the lurch, but, patriotism demands that I do this for my country kind of thing. Politicians like to say things like that. Mm-hmm. So that makes a little bit of sense to me. And also, he's always like, I don't want to say jazzed, but he does seem to get a little bit enthused when there's a weather disaster and he gets to put on the the windbreaker and the khakis and like go out into the snowstorm and stuff, which is kind of what a Homeland Security guy does, right? Or the head would do. So, there are ways in which that makes some sense, you know.
Mhm. Now, what happens? Say everything kind of falls into place for him, and Biden is elected president. He's pulled in for Attorney General, Homeland Security, whatever.
Yeah.
What happens to New York?
Well, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, on the one hand, you could say Cuomo would not want to leave because he really would be leaving New York in a difficult position, right? I mean, the budget is a disaster. We're still dealing with the coronavirus and the economic after effects, which are really pretty devastating.
Yeah.
But you could also flip that and say, well, that might be a reason why he would want to leave, because like whoever's going to be governor for the next 2 years is going to be a totally miserable experience, and it's going to be, um, just a grim time. And he's right now he's kind of at the height of his popularity in terms of poll numbers and stuff, and that really can only go down from here because it's going to be budget cuts and layoffs and tax hikes and just all these miserable things that I can see him wanting to avoid.
Interesting. Well, you'll certainly have a lot of fodder to write about come November, December, January, February in this regard. So yeah, so thank you so much for joining me this week. And I'm certain that I will be reaching out to you to talk more in the coming weeks.
All right. Yeah, thanks. It was a lot of fun.